Hey guys, welcome to the first video on Black Fox Designs. My name's Adam. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this embossed plastic wrapped cover art in Photoshop. I've put a link in the description to the assets I'm using today if you want to follow along. Otherwise you can use your own and create some custom artwork for yourself. I'm going to be going over some Photoshop tools such as noise, clip and masks, and then some bevel and emboss stuff, and I'll also touch on some alignment and resizing tips that you can use in your workflow. So yeah, let's jump in. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new file in Photoshop, and then I'm going to give it a canvas size of 2000 by 2000. And in this background content section, I'm just going to change that to black, so we start with a nice black background. Then I'm going to open up this folder that I've linked to in the description, and I'm just going to drag this hollow texture over onto the canvas. Now, I don't want it touching the edges, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it by pressing Shift and Alt on my keyboard, and I'm just going to drag this handle. I'm going to leave it around 1800. Because I want about 100 pixels on either side. If you hold Command on your keyboard, you can actually see where the layer is in relation to the things around it. So you can see it as 100 pixels on either side here and 325 above and below. Now to make this black background fit a bit better with the image on top, I'm going to select the background layer and then I'm just going to go to Filter up here, Noise, Add Noise. I'll increase the amount so you can see the effect. Basically, Photoshop defaults to monochromatic normally, which is a black and white noise texture, but for this I'm going to go with the RGB version just because it's a lot brighter and I feel like it matches the image below it. So I only want a subtle texture, so I'm just going to bring this amount down, probably quite substantially, and I'm going to go with 7.5%, I think. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit T on the keyboard, and then I'm going to click anywhere on the canvas, and I'm just going to type in Ty Dolla sign. Hey guys, it's Future Adam here. So I've just picked up that I've added an R to dollar sign. I do apologize, I realize there's no R in Ty's name now. But yeah, for the rest of the video it's going to say R on there, so don't roast me in the comments for that. See ya. The font that I want to use for this artwork is called Codex, so I've linked that in the description. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm happy with the size that it is. I'm going to press V on the keyboard to bring up the Move tool, and then I'm just going to go and drag it against the edge of the graphic. If you hold Command, like earlier, we can see how far away it is from everything. So you can see there's 65 pixels away from the image at the moment. I'm going to bring that down to around 40. Yeah, that's good. So because we have 4 artist names across the top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt on the keyboard, and you can see that the arrow key changes to double arrows. That means that the layer is going to duplicate when we click and drag. So I'm going to hold that, and then I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to drag it, and that's going to give me another text layer. So to keep it in line with the previous layer, you just hold Shift, so that can stay in line horizontally, it can stay in line vertically, and it does do diagonally as well. But for this case, I'm going to go horizontal, so I'm going to hold Shift, and then release, and then I'm going to do Alt and Shift, Alt and Shift. And then I can change these to Kanye West, FKA Twigs, and Skrillex. Cool. So now I'm going to drag Skrillex right over to the right hand side of the image, and then I'm going to select all of the layers by holding Shift and clicking on the bottom layer. And I'm going to come up here to this distribute tool. So this is going to work out the space in between these items for you without you having to do anything. It just makes it a lot easier to line things up. Now my eye is actually being drawn out, I'd almost say diagonally, by these text layers because they're lined up against the image. So when I say that, when you step back and you look at it, it doesn't feel like the image flows upward. It actually feels like it curves out slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock these layers in by about 80 pixels. So I'm going to select the layer, and then I'm going to hold Shift on the keyboard, and I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Holding Shift moves it by 10 pixels instead of 1 pixel. And I'm just going to do the same for Ty on this side. And then I'm going to select all the layers again, and I'm just going to redistribute. Cool, so I'm happy with that. Now it feels like the text has a bit more room to breathe. It doesn't feel like it's coming off the canvas, and it doesn't feel like it's in competition with the edge of the graphic. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to open up that folder again, and you're going to open up the credits file. So I've typed out these for you already, so you just have to copy and paste them in. Hit T for your type tool again, and we'll just paste it in there. As you can see, it's way too big, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. That's way too small. And then I'm going to change the font because I don't actually want this font on here because I don't feel it's as readable at this size. And because I want them to be credit-like, almost like a movie poster, I'm going to change it to one of my favorite fonts, which is Oswald. I've linked to this in the description as well. This is a free font, and I'm going to go with Demi Bold. For the actual corporation section, I'm going to bring this down to a light font because I want the emphasis to be on the featured artists on the top, because there are actually additional vocals on the track, so I just wanted to give those guys a little bit of spotlight as well. You can see that the space in between these two lines is a bit too big, so I'm going to open the character panel up here, and then I'm going to bring the lead in down to around 30. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the Move tool and I'm going to see how far away it is. So it's actually 37 pixels, and we know that these layers up here are 40. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock this down by 3 so it lines up top and bottom. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in these two logos. I'm going to do the Atlantic one first. I'm going to drag that onto the canvas and bring it down here. I'll invert it so you can see it. So I'm just going to press Command and I to invert it. And I'm going to resize it by holding Shift. I'm going to do the same thing for the WEA logo. Bring that down here. Resize that. And then I'm going to invert that as well. So I'm just going to bring it out by 10 pixels on that side, 10 pixels on that side, and then I'm going to make sure that the top of the Atlantic logo is 40 pixels from the text. So now everything lines up 40, 40, 40. So you can see it's a bit off center now. I've added the logos at the bottom, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of the layers and I'm going to pull them up, holding Shift, and it will show me the middle. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tidy these layers up. So I'm going to grab the artist at the top and I'm just going to press Command and G to make that a group, and then I'm going to name this group Artists. I'm going to do the same again for this bottom section for the credits. I'm just going to rearrange that. So now to fill these sections with color, I'm just going to use a really simple clipping mask. That makes sure that our file is maintained in a non-destructive way, because if we rasterize the text and actually apply the color that way, it means we can't go back and edit the text if we make a spelling mistake. So I'm just going to duplicate this holo texture by pressing Command and J on my keyboard, and I'm going to drag it up and over the artists. And then what I'm going to do in the layers panel, I'm going to drag this down, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select Create Clipping Mask. And then that is just going to apply itself to the text underneath. So now we can drag this holo image around whichever way we want to make sure that the colors work best for the artwork. So I'm going to go with that. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing with the credits at the bottom. So I'm duplicating the layer with Command and J, dragging it above the credits, moving the layer itself, and then right click and creating a clipping mask. So as you can see, it's a great way to kind of merge the text and the texture that you're working with, and it just ties it all together a little bit better than white text itself. And also, if you ever need to change anything, you can just go ahead, and do that, and it will keep the clipping mask on top of the text. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new text layer on top of the original holo texture just for this final song title. I'm going to resize that. And then a great way to align something to a specific object is I'm going to do the same thing earlier. I'm going to hit Command and select that section, and then the marching ants are going to go around that original graphic. And then all I'm going to do up here is I'm just going to use these align tools to align it to the center. So to get this see-through kind of bevel and emboss look that I've gone with here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the fill of this layer down to 0. It does mean that the type is still there, it just doesn't have any fill on it, which is going to allow us to make a see-through emboss. So double click on your layer and then check the bevel and emboss button. Depending on your settings, you can see that it creates quite a wild effect. This isn't particularly very nice. So you're going to want to play with these values until you get something that works for you. I personally wanted an idea of sort of like a really minimally embossed business card for this. So I'm going to just play with these values until I get something that I'm happy with. Yeah, I think maybe 30%. And then I'm actually going to change the light source, so you can see from this preview and here that the light source is coming directly above at 90 degrees. So I'm just going to bring it round to around, I think to around 60. That looks good. And then this also shows you how close you are to the light source as well. So for this one, I'm going to leave that on 30. For the shadow mode, because I want the text to blend just a little bit better with the graphic underneath, I'm going to select that and I'm going to pick one of the deeper purples. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it does just make it blend a little better with the layer underneath. So I'm going to click OK to that, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, to increase the intensity of the effect, because these values are already at 100%, I'm just going to duplicate this layer twice by hitting Command and J on the keyboard. And you can see that the shadows and the highlights increase pretty drastically. I actually think 3 is too many, so I'm just going to go with 2. And I'm going to group these together and just name this title. And I think I'm just going to resize this a little bit bigger to around there. Yeah, cool. I'm also just going to show you how I add this plastic cover over the top. So I downloaded this from Flywork. I've not included it in the folder because I paid for it, so I don't want to be redistributing it. But this is a really popular effect at the moment. You've probably seen it quite a lot on various album artworks. It just adds sort of like a realism to the artwork. So when it's on Spotify or something, it actually looks like the artwork's wrapped up in plastic. So it's really simple to use. I've just dragged it on like I did the original graphic, and I'm going to resize it so it fits about there. And I'm just going to change the blend mode to lighten. So if I change it back to normal, you can see that the vibrancy is affected. The lighten blend mode just lets through a bit more light, so it's going to bring that vibrancy and saturation back up. So there we go, all done. This is the final product. I've gone ahead and created some other artwork in this style as well to show you how else you can use what we covered in the video. But the main purpose of graphic design is to communicate a message, so as long as you're interpreting something and then you're putting that message out into the world through your design, you really can't go far wrong. I'd love to see what you come up with, so feel free to post a link to some of your artwork in the comments. This is my first tutorial, so if you made it to the end, then I hope you learned something, and if you enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe as well. I guess I'll leave it there for today, and I'll catch you in the next video.